Thank you very much, Kieran. I suppose what we can take from that is that, as Bertie said one time, a lot done, a lot more to do. And one of the ways that we can help our own building of trust and reputation and referability is to be confident of the information that we have for our customers when we're meeting them, and be on top of it enough to not only tell them where they're at with their financial products, but help them in their planning and help them to build in a personally knowing way, the best plan for their future. And our next session now from Malcolm Craig from PWC should help us to see what more we can do in that area. Malcolm.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Hi. So I'm glad to see so many people have stayed for this section. The prospect of 45 minutes on a data standard doesn't fill anybody with excitement. But we'll try and keep this relevant to you specifically and what you're doing. We're going to tie it into what we talked about last year around operational efficiency, and hopefully it'll be a worthwhile presentation for you. So let me see. Clicker. Here we are. Okay, so what we're going to talk through today, we're going to look at the origins of where we are, which is the 2016 report on operational efficiency. We're going to talk about the objectives of the project. We're going to talk about the relevance of customer data and analytics at a broader level. So what financial institutions are doing at the moment, what you can be doing, how you link all of these things together. Being aware of the broader environment is important for you because that is going to impact on what you do on a day-to-day basis. They essentially represent the competition. Methodology, how we got to the point where we are at the moment. The findings from the review, the challenges we faced. We're going to talk about the advantages of a common data set. We're going to talk about the feedback and the queries that we got from the life companies, particularly, of course, a key stakeholder in what we're trying to achieve. Then we'll talk a little bit about implementation, testing, change management, and the importance of those things so as to ensure that you have continuity of service. And then I'll do a little sell at the end to try and encourage the implementation of this. As we go through this, please feel free to put up your hand. There's roving mics there. Ask a question. I'm happy to take questions at any time. Can't promise I'm going to have answers, but let's take the questions and we can have a discussion. Okay, so our 2016 report on financial broker efficiency. It highlighted a number of areas, and I had conversations with the team in PIBA about, okay, what are the next steps? What are we going to look at next? Obviously, we wanted to take some of these elements and bring them to life. A report is only so good for holding down things if it's good and heavy. But we need to bring it to life. And what we're trying to do there, we looked at a number of the areas. One recommendation we have was improved intuitive CRM functionality. We live in a world of intuition. You heard about Kieran there talking about social media, Twitter, Amazon, all of these companies. They focus on intuitive applications. Amazon does the one touch buy. You press one button and you've bought. Domino's Pizza have recently come out and they will install a little button in your house. And if you want a pizza, you just press that button. And magically, half an hour later, a man on a bike appears with a pizza for you. It's paid for. Your favorite pizza has been chosen. It's all there. It's all about intuitive, straightforward, easy. So that was one of the things we recommended with regard to the CRM companies and how they need to consider how they're developing their functionality. We looked at potentially CRM provision of end customer access. The idea being that your value proposition is around independent advice. Let somebody else deal with the data. If the CRM people could provide the data directly to the customer and essentially take you out of the loop on that, then you're not wasting time getting data, developing valuations. You're sitting down and you're talking about, okay, what's your risk profile at the moment? What are your needs with regard to your day-to-day financial? What can you put aside for your future? And have those real value-add conversations. And as we looked at all of these ideas, we came to a conclusion. You need one thing really to allow those to come to fruition, and that is a common data set, a quality data set. For example, if you're trying to build intuitive CRM functionality, but you've got a little bit of data from one company and more data from another, and then another bit of data from another life company, and you're not really sure how they all meld together. It's really hard to focus on the functionality and the intuitive nature. If you want to provide end customer access as a CRM agent, then the end customer's looking at their Irish Life policy and they understand it fully and they've got all their bits and pieces, and then they're looking at the Zurich policy, and this isn't a reflection on the inputs from those life companies, it's just random examples. And there's half the fields are missing. Well, that's only going to drive more queries and more customer dissatisfaction. You've got to have standardization across the board if you're going to present this kind of initiative. So to enable that, you need a common data standard. You need everyone providing the same data to the CRMs at the same quality in the same timely manner. So this is a section from the report from 2016. And it's where this came to fruition. So what we're looking for is a data set that doesn't differ on completeness, format, and timeliness. We saw one life company only provided 20 of the 50 key data points that were being looked for. We talked a lot last year about the financial brokers not being the gatekeepers of data. If that is your value statement, that once a year you appear with a financial statement that presents your customer's financial position, that is the value you're adding, you're in trouble. You need to think carefully about your value, which is independent financial advice, not the provision of data. We had conversations with a number of the brokers, the CRMs, etc., but someone put it very clearly that when they're dealing with the customers, a very simple thing to provide, which they don't have, is what has the customer put in? What have they taken out? What's it worth now? If we could get to that point, this particular broker said to me, it would go a long way. And I thought, you know what, that's a really succinct, straightforward, practical example of where we need to be. We then had examples in last year's report of commonly unavailable data, and you can see there around transfer values, maturity values, withdrawal frequency, essentially a lot of the points that broker brought up with me there quite recently. So that's why we came to a recommendation, which is a standardized data set. The production of a common data set for distribution from the life companies to the CRM providers represents advantages to all stakeholders in the industry. Reduced operating costs for the life companies, faster and more efficient data processing for CRM providers, ultimately resulting in better quality, up-to-date information for the financial broker and the customer. Now, as we look at that then, we look at one of the core issues that we had from the 2016 report, which is around confidence. We did a survey. And in that survey, we asked, when you're referring to your CRM system and you're engaging with your customer and you're developing a statement, how likely are you to go back to either the life company directly or to their portal to verify that data? 69% said that they will go back. Now, from an operational efficiency perspective, that's not good, because you as a broker, you're sitting there, you've got the data, you're not sure the data's right. I got to make a call, make sure this data is right and up to date. Now, that's not efficient. That's why we're moving to this model where we have a standardized data set. So you can be confident in what you have. You get it once, the CRM's provided to you, and you're happy. Now, we're going to talk about the challenges the CRMs have as we go through this. It's not as simple as putting the blame on their doorstep. And to be honest, it's no one's fault and everybody's fault. But we'll explain that as we go through. So what we're looking for is a clear flow of data from the life company to the CRM, to the broker, and to the customer. The standard will enable a standardized set of core data that should be provided by each life company in a consistent manner. The new standard will provide a clear definition of each data point. That's really important. What exactly is being sent here? The new data set will ensure a common technical format because the data is coming in every format you can imagine. So we want something common. It makes it easier. It makes it faster for the CRMs to get it. One of the things we noticed was that on talking to one of the CRM providers, they're saying it takes about 2 days to take the data in, concatenate it from all the different providers, and get it into their system. The reason it takes 2 days is because it's in every different format you can imagine. However, if you're in a position where it's in a common format, well, then it works. You just press a button, it sucks it all into the machine, and it's over to the broker and to the customer almost immediately. Thereby, you don't have that anomaly between what the life company is producing, which is live data, versus what the CRM provider is producing, which is fundamentally 2 days old in some cases. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry in general and what's happening. Now, it was interesting. Kieran, the last presenter, talked about customer advocacy. This is a really core area in financial institutions, customer advocacy. Now, if anyone remembers, and looking around the room, no disrespect, but like myself, we all remember the 80s and the 90s. The 80s and the 90s, I had my bank. My bank was the one I went down to down the street. I knew the people in there. I would have conversations with them. That's how I did my banking. And then banking changed. And all of a sudden, there was the ATM machine, which I was quite young, and I thought that was great. The trouble was you couldn't get pound coins out of an ATM machine, which was a big issue for me. But the ATM machine. So what that resulted in then was you weren't going into the branch quite as much. Then all of a sudden, there was internet banking. And you were going into the branch, and they were just showing you how to use internet banking. Because the whole focus from the banking perspective was to push the customer out of the branch and drive operational efficiency. Less people in the branch, more... Is that a question, Sean? No. I'm kind of relieved. More online, automated interaction. Now, that's great. It's very efficient. But all of a sudden, my bank isn't my bank anymore. It's the bank. And then if I go to the bank over here or the bank over there, I don't really care. Banks made themselves commodities. And interestingly, Kieran talked about advocacy, and your NPS score is 0. 0. Oh, that's terrible. Actually, when you look at your competitors in financial institutions, they're often -40, -50. So 0 is not a bad score. But you see now that there is an opportunity for financial institutions to change the way that they're working, and that is through data. Now, all of a sudden, they're focusing again on analytics and knowing the customer at a personal level, but in an automated manner, to try and get that advocacy back. So you see that chart there, that references the amount of investment that the financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, etc., are putting into analytics and marketing. And what is their key focus? Their strategic priority is customer-based penetration, customers they have already and that they know, getting to know them better, and personalizing their interaction with them in an automated fashion. And then developing greater advocacy. You know, I stay with Bank of Ireland or AIB. You know, they really understand my financial needs. And that's going to develop further with PSD2, where you're actually going to have third-party providers sitting in front of the banks, consolidating all your financial information and providing it to you in an intuitive manner. So the world will change when PSD2 comes in, we think. So this is all a threat to the financial broker, because what do you rely on? You rely on advocacy, you rely on your independence, you rely on relationships. But if people are automating those, that presents a challenge to you. Now, we talked last year, you might remember this chart. Now, last year we had this pie chart down at the bottom there, and it was 2006 to 2004. And what we were saying was that during the Celtic Tiger and then the bust, stickiness of broker one business was far higher than direct business or business sold by the life companies or through banks or whatever else it might be. But the broker business was stickier. So it moved from 2006, it was 52% of annual premium new business in 2006 was from the broker channel. In 2014, it was 64%. People who had stayed on and maintained their investments were people who were represented by financial brokers. So that's good news for life companies because the broker channel is working. However, what we pointed out last year was that there is a move towards direct through greater advocacy, now Kieran mentioned as well that the people you're targeting are 45 to 65. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think the 25 to 44 bracket is very important for mortgages, for mortgage protection, for pensions, for life policies. A lot of people are buying those at that age. So that's an important segment. And what we pointed out last year was these people like to engage online. And if you look at these statistics now, 1 year later, we're seeing a jump in direct from 4% to 8%. 2% of that is at the cost of brokers, and 2% is at the cost of company reps. Now, is that because of a preference of younger people to work online? Perhaps. Is it just simply that the economy is picking up and people aren't thinking as much and aren't being as careful with their financial decisions? Perhaps. I don't know. But my feeling is that the direct channel is becoming stronger because that is how people are living their lives. So this is from our report from last year. Sorry, I need to keep up with my, there we are, 8, great. The internet has become part of the process. 8 out of 10, now this is an American report, and America's always had a little bit further ahead than us, but it's a good reflection of where we're going to be. 8 out of 10 insurance purchases include reference to the internet in some way or another. Of the 25 to 44-year-old age group, 31% of them prefer to buy insurance online. Prefer it. Now that 31% in 25 to 44 age group is growing all the time because the younger people coming up, the millennial group that Kieran referred to, are growing. And this is how they like to do things. They like to sit down. We talked about the omni-channel framework last year. So no longer are you just having a chat. If I speak to any of you and I'm your customer, whatever you say to me, I'm going to be immediately onto the internet checking, okay, I'll check that fund, I'll check that policy, I'll check out these people, I'll look at them on LinkedIn. You have to manage so many different channels. And Kieran's point was interesting with regard to the penetration, that not as many people are on Facebook, et cetera, as you would think. And that's really interesting. I was surprised by that. But at the same time, you must remember that engagement through those channels is free and easy. It is easy to have a Facebook page up there and put stuff on. It's easy to have a LinkedIn profile and put interesting articles on to show you're an expert in a particular area. So don't negate those channels. They're very important. So the drivers towards direct are the consumer on, let's see, for you, it's the left-hand side. I have a screen here too. And the organization. So organizations are being pushed around costs. So that's pushing them direct. They're being, in the States, there's an issue with agent reduction. They're struggling with getting agents and brokers to represent them at a quality level. And then also there's a growth pressure. Everywhere it's quarterly, growth. So, okay, we're doing a certain amount through a broker channel or agent channel. How much more can we do through the direct channel? So that is driving direct distribution. And direct distribution is your competitor. So how do you deal with that competitor? You need to be up to date with regard to your data analytics and understanding your customers. So you need to integrate analytics into your strategy. Do you segment your customers? Do you know who your high-value customers are? You need industrial strength foundation to do that. And that's what we're talking about. The foundation is the standardized data set. A focus of your strategy needs to be around customer centricity and aligning your strategy to that. That's what the larger financial institutions are doing. Every one of them that you speak to, you go in there and they all have the same ideas around customer centricity. Everything has been made around the customer. That has always been fundamental to the financial broker proposition. However, the larger financial institutions are getting in on that game too, and they have the tools to do it and the resources to do it. The results are proven. If you engage in this kind of activity, if you understand your analytics and your customers better and engage more effectively with them, you will get good results. And that's why you need to build that into your strategy. Okay, so that's just kind of a broader contextual piece. So let's get back to what we're doing, which is the data standard. So the methodology we used was threefold. We wanted to understand the current state, and the next slide is going to talk a little bit about that. So what I mean by the current state is the data currently sent by life companies to the CRMs. Then we wanted to understand the desired future state. What data do you want? And then we need to get life company acceptance. So I'll talk a little bit about the desired future state. The process was as much a syndication process, a socialization process, as a technical process. I would imagine as you came in here, I don't know what you were expecting when I was going to talk about a data standard, but maybe expecting me to go through a spreadsheet with 55 data points and explain each of them and say, I hope you think these are the right ones. That report is available. We're agreeing it's still with the life companies, so you can do that, but that's not what we'll talk about today. This was about syndication. What is important to you? And as I talked about at the outset, a really important element was, what has the customer put in? What have they taken out? What's it worth? Those kind of statements really helped us in understanding what we needed to develop with regard to this. We, of course, then, in the understanding the desired future state, one of the key drivers, one of the key stakeholders in all of this is, of course, the CRM companies. We had tremendous support from Money Advice, Best Advice, Tishkent, Clear Choice. I can see Paul in front of me, and that's why I was afraid of getting it wrong, and WealthTrack. Really a lot of help there. And fundamentally, it was really important for them to provide us with the technical advice, to take the sentiments that we took from the brokers and translate it into a technical document. And then, of course, the life companies. You see there, step 3 is around life company acceptance. Needless to say, we didn't want to be rolling into the life companies after 3 or 4 months of work and saying, guys, look at what we've brought. And then they say, no way, no way. So we had 2 or 3 of the life companies who engaged on an informal basis regularly, just taking a little check on what we were doing to make sure it matched. And that's really paid off when we come to step 3, to make sure we stayed online. And thankfully, at most times, we were. So the current state review. This diagram here demonstrates what has been provided at the moment. So I think the important things for you to notice is there is lots of different stuff. These red boxes over here represent tables. They perhaps represent CSV files, maybe a little bit like an Excel file, text-delimited files, data files, but it comes in all sorts of different ways. So at a macro level, you look at that and you go, yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? There's a lot of different stuff there. Then you go to a micro level. When you look at the actual data, the data was labeled. In all cases, it was labeled, but it wasn't defined. In 1 or 2 cases, one had a really good technical definition document, but it wasn't a business definition document, but at least having that was able to provide us with clarity of what they were doing. One of the others had a reasonably good business definition document, but all in all, we had a sea of data, and we really struggled to understand what it is. So it has to be noted that your CRM providers are doing a sensational job to digest that data and turning it into something useful. But what would be better is if we could turn this data into something consistent and structured and clear, that when you get a data point from a life company and you receive it, you know what it is. There's not a question, is that a gross, is that a net sum? That valuation date, is that the end of the policy or is that current? There are questions, questions, questions. And thankfully, in the broker sessions, there was a lot of patience shown to us because we brought in this sea of data, and a few faces around the table were looking, going, what do you want us to do with that? And a few others then looked at it and said, okay, let's dig in. And thankfully, from that, we've developed what we believe is quite a good standard. Now, why are we in the position why we have this hodgepodge of data? Surely all this started with Assure Link. Now, I don't really know, but you would imagine in the Assure Link days, there would have been a standardized data set. But it has developed organically over time. So what I mean by that is that a CRM provider has an idea of improved functionality. They go to each of the life companies individually. Each of the life companies answer that need in their own manner. And then over the years, it has all changed to allow this, a hodgepodge of different approaches and structures. There's an operational impact to the CRMs. They've got to make sense of this hodgepodge. There's an operational impact to the life companies because the CRM providers are going to the life companies saying, we'd like 2 new data points. Okay. And they've had another CRM in the day before, and they'll have another one in the day after looking for something different. And then they might have a new entrant looking for something as well. So the level of engagement the life companies have with the CRMs is quite high, and I would imagine the life companies are frustrated with that, and suitably the CRMs are frustrated as well because they would like things turned around faster. So nobody's happy. What it's missing is a central structure. Okay, so what are the challenges? Data ambiguity, I referred to that. We don't know what this data is. We think we know, but we're not sure. Fragmented data, it's incomplete. Some people provide this much data, some people provide this much data. System diversity. The file structures all change and are different. Low value perception. This comes back to the brokers looking at it going, yeah, that looks right, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to make a call. So where do we want to get to? We want to get to data clarity. When there's a data point in there, we all know what it is. It's clearly defined. Our standard has that. For each of the data points, we have a clear business definition. Thus far, the feedback, no one's questioned them, which is great. We have complete data. Now, from a life company perspective, complete data will always vary, because you look at some companies have a very specific product set, others have a broader product set, and we've had to create a standard for all. So invariably, not everyone is going to be sending pension information if they don't write pensions. And that makes sense. And we have that built into the standard as well. If you're unable to provide the information because it's not relevant, you fill that field with nines or zeros or null values or whatever it is. System consistency. So we got a lot of help from one of the CRMs with regard to creating a very nice data model that allows flexibility in what we do going forward. That it's a series of tables, they all link together, and this allows a consistent format for producing and receiving this data and a high value perception. So when the brokers get this data, you should be confident that it's right. And perception, as Kieran said before, is really important. Okay. So we're on to feedback from the life companies. So look, thankfully all the life companies have been really supportive and positive with regard to this. They see the opportunity for increased sales. They see the opportunity for reduced IT spend. Because if you are answering 5, 6 CRM companies' requests on a piecemeal basis, that's expensive. It's expensive for the commercial officer who needs to deal with them in the first instance. It's expensive for the business analyst who needs to go through their requests. It's expensive for the IT guys. It's expensive for the testing guys. It's expensive for the CRM companies. Something else that came up quite a lot was, is this a new Assure link? I wasn't around for Assure link, but people are a little apprehensive about it. This definitely is not a new Assure link. What we're doing here, the CRMs will still be in place. All we're doing is creating a commonality in the data that's been sent across to them. We have quite a detailed conversation around GDPR. For anybody who's not aware of it, GDPR is the new data protection standard. So what was put to us by particularly a very good conversation with one of the life companies where they were saying, can we send this information under GDPR? And what I pointed out was, look, if you are comfortable, you can send it under the current data protection legislation. Whatever due diligence you have done to make sure you are exercising your responsibility to the customer will still apply for GDPR. So I think they were comforted by that. But if you have a discussion within the life companies with regard to GDPR, please dislocate this from it. If you're happy to send data to CRMs and to brokers at the moment, then you should be happy under the new regime as well. If you're not, maybe you need to look at that and consider it. So I just put down, for people to understand what GDPR is, I put down a handful of the key points there. So fundamentally what GDPR is the new data protection legislation. We are relying on the 1988 and 2003 data protection laws. If you consider that the first iPhones were out in 2007, if you consider Facebook only came out in 2004, the world has changed a lot in that time. So they're updating it to make it more relevant to a time in our lives when data privacy is a big question for all of us. So what are the changes? A right to be forgotten. So at the moment, you're in a position where if you're holding customer data, you have to delete it after 7 years of inactivity. Data portability. This is to allow competition, that it has to be easy, that if I'm working with a bank or with a life insurance company or with whoever it is, that if I want my data transferred over to another institution to enable competition and me to take up another offering, that it's easy to do that. Transparency around consent. Breach mechanisms. You need to inform the data protection people within 72 hours of a material breach occurring. Storage. What they talk about here is knowing where your information is. So it's not as simple as saying, oh yeah, we know it's all secure, it needs to be documented. And I'm sure all of you people are familiar with the whole regulatory compliance side of things. If it's not documented, it's not done. They're building that into the data protection side. Privacy by design. This is really very similar to the data protection side where they talk about only take the information that you need and no more. And then accountability. Well, we already have data protection officers. But here's the big one that the life companies are going to be wondering about. And it is the fine of up to 4% of global turnover. 4% of global turnover. Now, I think that's capped at 20 million. But even if that fine of 20 million is applied, that's a pretty big number. And that's making people stop and think. Financial institutions across the town have significant projects in to make sure they understand their data privacy posture now. There's also direct right of action for citizens. This is relevant to the CRMs because CRMs are technically a data processor. If a breach comes from a CRM, the impacted individual can actually take a case directly with them. And applies to non-EU companies as well as EU companies. So that's just a little bit about GDPR, just to keep you up to date. So on the feedback as well, here's the big one. And it is implementation. So everyone was very helpful. We got to understand what the standard was. The life companies have said it's a great idea. There's a few technical queries still sitting with me. There's also people saying, look, I can't provide this. We don't do this. It's not relevant to us. That's all fine. We'll work through that, and we're very close to being finished. But implementation is the one thing everyone said is an issue. So what I want to draw out here is a few pieces to hopefully encourage people around implementation, because this is all worthless. All the time that's been invested by us and by the various stakeholders here is worthless unless we get this implemented. So we have created a standard with core and discretionary data. The idea behind that is the core data. Please, everybody give that to us. The discretionary data is stuff that we've seen some life companies producing already, but others are really going to struggle with that, and we recognize that. So we said, you know what? Rather than them not complying with the standard, let's just say that's discretionary. If you can, great. If you can't, that's okay. The new data set is conservative. From the very beginning, we agreed with the PIBA team that we're not going to push this to the nth degree because we needed to set a solid base foundation. When we have a solid base foundation, we can develop on that and build on that, but we need a beginning point. So it's conservative. It's developed to be data extraction, not data development. So when you're talking to your IT teams in the life companies and you're saying, okay, we want this, and they go, oh, that's a lot of work. It's not. It should simply be extraction of data that already exists. It's not a new data item. Okay, there's a new data model. That'll take a little bit of time to get together, but this is not a huge development, and it is supporting a big channel of sales. And it's designed to be forward-looking, not retrospective. This really came out in our broker sessions early on, where people started talking about, well, there was a policy by Irish Life back in the late 90s, and I still have a handful of accounts on that, and it was funny with bonus payments. How are we going to recognize that? And we thought, well, dear me, I don't know how we're going to recognize that. And then there was several others like that. We said, hold on, okay, no. We cannot create a standard that is based on stuff that happened 20 years ago. We've got to be forward-looking. What is the market like now? What facilitates that market now? And anything that happened in the past, if there are sidebar methodologies for getting that data, that can continue. But we can't have something that turns into a hodgepodge to facilitate every product that came out in the last 30 years. Draggers. So we have drivers, the green ones, and the draggers. Each life company is struggling with a commitment on data implementation, and IT capacity is strained. As I mentioned earlier, the investment in IT is increasing. Everybody's pushing. And to get this into the queue is difficult. So we recognize that. But please, as it's been reviewed, look at the drivers, look at the opportunity, and recognize this is not the biggest ask in the world. So what do we need around an implementation schedule? We need senior leadership commitment. We need commitment from the IT departments. We need commitments from the IT departments of the CRM companies as well. We need allocation of suitable and sufficient resource to deliver the program. And we need effective communications and change management. And we'll talk a little bit about change management in a moment because that's important. And what we are asking is that we're really coming to the end of Q1 now. We're not quite there yet. But what we're asking, if people can target by the end of Q3. We think that's a fair ask. If we're to target anything later than that, well, you're saying, sure, we'll do that in 2018. And before you know it, it's 2019, and everyone will have forgotten, and this won't be pushed through. So if people can build it into their IT development plans now, talk to their demand managers now, and get this in. And if we look at the change management, which is the next slide up, I thought it was this one. If we look at the change management element, you'll see that there is a benefit to this as well, in that in future, your engagement with the CRM companies will be predictable. But I'll get onto that in a sec. Something important as well for the life companies, for the CRMs, for the brokers, as the new data set kicks in, please ensure, what we don't want to do is create a retrograde step where the data is less good than it was. So testing is important, engagement is important. So the CRM companies may reach out to you guys to do a little bit of testing as well and say, look, this is the new data coming through, you're comfortable with it, will you review a few customers, make sure you're happy. So your support on that will be important too. So here's change management. Needless to say, this isn't going to be a static standard. This will have to be something that's dynamic. So we have a number of people who will want to change it. The CRM companies will more than likely be the key drivers of change. As they want improved functionality, as they want a different flavor of a particular data point, they'll put in a request. The life companies as well. I was surprised, but there was a couple of life companies said, yeah, we may want to change that standard ourselves to try and become more homogenous with regard to other data extracts that we're running. So that's fine too, that can happen. And even the brokers may be in a position where you go, you know what would be really valuable to us? This particular piece of data. So you have an opportunity to put in your say on what you would like included in the data standard in the future. The regularity of change we're going to suggest is annual. And you might think, well, that's not dynamic. We're in a world now where things happen in days and minutes, not years. But the reality is at the moment, when a CRM company looks to engage with a life company, it takes time. A meeting is 2 or 3 weeks down the road, you introduce the idea, then you have another meeting 3 or 4 weeks later, you talk to the IT team, then another 3 or 4 weeks later they feed back to you. I would imagine, and I don't know, but I would imagine a request from idea to implementation for the CRM companies would probably take a good year. So what we're suggesting is that on a regular basis, that everyone prepares, say, the end of Q1 each year, their submission. That submission will then be taken by PIBA. PIBA will review it to make sure it's of a suitable quality. Is it clearly defined? Is there a good business rationale behind it? What are you trying to do with this? And then once they have taken those requests, they will summarize those and circulate those to the life companies for agreement, and then that's what will be implemented. Now, why that works well for the life companies is it's predictable. So we reckon by April, May of every year, whatever the set date is that we agree, we will have a request from PIBA for additional data to be added onto this. We will put 30 days of IT development time aside to make that. And that can be built into the annual budgets and planning for them, which means you will get a faster turnaround and a better product. From the CRM perspective, there's a consolidated voice. There's an opportunity that instead of calling 7 different life companies and requesting something, there's an opportunity to put in one request and have somebody else validate that and put it through with the strength of a centralized function, as opposed to scratching around everybody and doing your best to get the data that you're looking for, which is time-consuming and inefficient for everybody. So there's the process at the bottom. PIBA issue a change management document. Companies fill in the requested change and rationale. PIBA circulated. All potential requests must be agreed and approved by all stakeholders. Life companies make the changes. It's not too complicated. Build in some testing in there and we're all good. So this is my last slide. These are the benefits. The life companies benefit from lower inbound calls and operational efficiencies. The data is better. Less people are calling. Reduced CRM negotiation. There is one time a year where you have to negotiate this. Reduced CRM-driven development. You are not creating bespoke CRM changes on a monthly, bi-monthly basis. It's one a year. And improved sales. That's important. CRM companies benefit from a solid base of consistent data and improved data accuracy, completeness, and clarity, making their processing and their work easier. The brokers benefit from improved data, provision of improved customer service, confidence that when you look at the data, it's right. And the customers benefit from a better service, faster, more reliable data. There's benefits to everybody in this. The ask is not huge. Please try and realize the benefits through implementation. And that's me. Any questions? That's why I have the last slide there. Whoop, how did that one come up? That's why I have the last slide. to try and encourage it to happen. There is no reason why not. We're not asking for something monumental. This isn't a new data layer, new infrastructure, €1 million investment. It's a small piece of IT development. It's a data extract. There's no reason why it shouldn't.
But you don't think that if you've got common data coming in, the whole point is that life insurance companies want to keep their websites active so people keep going back and hopefully put more business through them than through their competitors. If you've got something standardized, that's kind of making them probably fade into the background. So therefore, if you've got they're controlling what you're going back to, it's going to make them pretty more aligned to them than if you're just going through a common data process.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying, and that's always essentially the channel conflict issue that we have here. But fundamentally, with the amount of investment life companies are putting into their own portals, it will be a long time before what can be provided directly on the broker channel can compete with that. However, if you can provide your broker channel, which is a core source of revenue and cheap revenue, as I said last year, you don't pay a broker when they're on holidays. You don't pay a broker when they're having their coffee. You don't pay a broker when they're having their lunch. You pay a broker when they provide you with a sale. So all it is supporting that high value, low cost sales channel to allow them to do their job properly.
Have you had a chance to talk to non-life service and product providers to brokers about this idea of having a common data set?
Non-life?
Yeah, maybe I'll give you a couple of
yeah, go ahead.
Say a small self-administered company that's providing self-directed structures for brokers' clients, or a property company that the broker, a property investment that the broker is putting clients into?
No, the scope of this has been focused on the life companies, the 7 large life companies, and the data that they provide to the CRMs. It's a valid point, but it's beyond the scope of what we looked at.
Thank you.
Hiya.
Sorry, just to repeat, the worry I would have is that Q3 of 2017 sounds unattainable to me. I don't know how your experience with the 7 life companies has been, but ours has been dreadful. And from talking to the CRM providers, they echo that sentiment that the life cos, it's not all of them, but some of them simply won't step up to the mark. And I'd be very sceptical that this will happen. I'd love to see it, and I'd be quite happy to congratulate you if it does, but I'd be very worried that it won't happen.
Yeah, it's a real risk, there's no doubt. I thought for some time with regard to what timelines to put on this, and I really didn't want to let it go out into 2018, because then it's the long finger. So I thought to put some degree of pressure on, to put some degree of focus, we needed to set it out for the next 6 months. As I said, the level of IT investment in producing this is not massive. I've worked in IT functions myself. I understand the complexity of a data extract. So will it happen? Is it difficult for them? It will happen. When? I don't know. Is it difficult? It's not that difficult, but it's hard to do things when you have scarce resource, because the resource has all been pumped into GDPR, into particular direct-facing portals, etc., etc. But they are supportive. Every one of them has said they want to see this happen. So we have to ride that support and get this pushed in.
Malcolm, I'd just like to say that's a fantastic piece of work, and wish you really well. Certainly, I think everyone here would be very supportive of that. So well done, and thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, anybody else? One more.
Malcolm, Frank Murray. My question really is because we've had many discussions with life companies over the years about data. And my question is, how can you ensure that the common data set you try to put in place isn't just defaulting to the lowest common denominator and brokers end up with less in the future than they currently have?
Yeah, yeah. And Frank, that was a risk we called out very early on. You're absolutely right in saying that. That the last thing we wanted to do is all of a sudden, because you have the best in breed life companies producing 100 data points, and all of a sudden they don't need to produce those 100 data points because the data standard is only looking for 80. And you're getting less data from them then. So we've taken a retrograde step. So that's why we built into the core and discretionary data. The core data is the stuff that we would ask everyone to produce. The discretionary is stuff that we've seen some of them producing, and we'd encourage them to continue producing, but would potentially be too great a challenge for adoption for the others. And that's how we dealt with that risk. Also, of course, Frank, it was in the syndication process where we've spoken to all of the CRM companies and spoken to the brokers and the life companies to make sure that we weren't doing that, to make sure people were comfortable with what was in there. Okay, hopefully the data presentation wasn't as bad as everyone expected. Thank you for your time, and yeah, that's it.